you'd get into the back seat of like a beater and you're like, okay, I've got my friend here. I don't know who you three people are. Like the other people in the car. Next thing you know, you're going 80 down a dirt road and you're like, I didn't sign up for this. Like this wasn't what I wanted.
My hometown messed me up. She won big on a Timmy's Cup. I heard about it at the Rotary Club. That's so Canardian. Don't stop.
This is Canardian, the podcast that's gossiping about Canadian hometowns. I'm Katie Lohr, author of Pod the North, the newsletter for Canadian podcasters. And I'm joined by Kyle Moore, host and creator of Life's a Wreck, a podcast sharing stories about the world through the lens of mental health. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I was telling you before we hopped on, but I feel like I need to share with the listeners as well that this has like been something that I've been looking forward to for a while. Like, you know, when you had like, as a kid, when you had like a play date on the horizon and you were like, oh my gosh, it's almost Friday. Like, I can't wait. So this was same thing. I was really stoked. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh my God, that makes me so happy. And to call it a play date, it very much feels like an adult play date. Like, yeah, adult play dates are just gossip at this point, right?
100%.
Like talking about our trauma, all these things, you know, that's
stuff.
Just classic stuff. So Kyle, where is your hometown and how would you describe it in 5 words or less?
5 words or less. Okay. So my hometown is the town of St. Stephen, New Brunswick. And if I was to describe it in only 5 words or less, I would say border, because we're on the border with the States. That's
all it's got going for it.
Border. Country.
Okay.
Very country forward. Charming, grumpy, and chocolate.
Love it. Okay, yeah. This is aligned with where I'm heading with things, so this is great. Here's my little tourism board pitch of St. Stephen. St. Stephen, New Brunswick. The town motto is the middle of everywhere. The population is 8,100 people, and it's a beautiful historic town with lots of greenery, plenty of gorgeous old homes, and scenic views of the is it St. Croix or St. Croix?
St. Croix.
St. Croix River.
Yeah.
You never know with the drink. I'm like, is it St. Croix? LaCroix? La Croix?
It's actually just a lovely sparkling river.
Yeah, so that river flows into the Atlantic Ocean, and it's a border town, as you mentioned. It's across the border of Maine. It's very walkable. It's a great starting point for whale watching, and probably most of all, as you've mentioned, Kyle, it is a place best known as Canada's chocolate town.
Yes. And
because it is the center of the universe, St. Stephen is about a 14-hour drive from Toronto, which is honestly a lot shorter than I expected. Given all of this, what is your thought? How does all of this make you feel, Kyle?
Yeah, I feel like that is I feel like that would get the check mark from Tourism NB for sure. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. So I had a really fantastic childhood growing up in St. Stephen. My family was originally from a small town in Ontario called Perth, Ontario. And then we moved out to St. Stephen when I was in grade 4. But I do say it's my hometown because that's like the town that shaped the person that I am today. And yeah, like Canada's chocolate town. Okay, first of all, the slogan being the middle of everywhere cracks me up because like even just to drive to the next town from St. Stephen is like 30 minutes. So it's like, it's one of those things which I suppose if you're like thinking about like Toronto, you're like, oh, that's like, I'm still on Queen Street for 25 or 30
Toronto,
minutes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But when you like leave St. Stephen and then see like nothing but highway for 25, 30 minutes, and then there's this next town, that to call it the middle of everywhere, I think is pretty funny. I also would love to have a conversation with like the team that decided on the middle of everywhere, because I don't think there's like anything particularly that marks St. Stephen. Like, I mean, we're super far on the East Coast, so you can't say we're like the middle of Canada. We are like, I don't know, probably like the 17th most popular entry to the States. So I don't really think you could like mark that as being like our like, woohoo, we're the portal between Canada and the Americas. Yeah, so just a very interesting, an interesting, maybe the middle of everywhere in terms of, just everybody's kind of in their own little world and everybody congregates in St. Stephen. You have a lot of like, I feel like St. Stephen really does a great job of bringing in an eclectic group of people. When I said charming, grumpy, like I feel like you have those traditional East Coast, you know, kind of like country folk who are just like all about, you know, I'm just happy with my homestead and I want nothing else and nobody else to be around. And then you also have like, because it's close to the States, like you do have people who are like, oh, we have like a summer home in Calais. And so we like spend time
which is
in
like a 20-minute drive away.
Literally. So it's so, yeah, it's an interesting spot. Canada's Chocolate Town, that is, I know we're going to chat about that because that is
we're going to get into that.
Oh yeah, there are some layers to the chocolate stories that we have. But yeah, no, St. Stephen was it honestly. I look back very fondly. St. Stephen has changed a little bit, apparently, since I've been gone, according to my parents. But when I was growing up, it was a great place to raise a couple kids. I had a lot of, good opportunities to meet great people. Some of my closest friends in the world are still people I knew from elementary school. So it's, it was, I've got very fond memories of good old St. Stephen.
I am willing to bet the middle of everywhere thing comes down to like American imperialism. I almost feel like if your town is a border town in Canada, this is a sense of pride, and therefore you have this opening up into the better country over there down south. And I can't help but feel like, oh, it's the center of everything because this is where you can access the United States of America.
It's 100%. For you literally hit the nail on the head. You know what's so funny is like growing up, especially not even growing up, but like over the past couple of years under a Trump America, what has been, I think, maybe it plays into that middle of everything, angle that you just talked about, is that like you cross from the States into Canada and you're like, oh, here we go. The land of the maple leaf. Like we're truly gone. And as you're driving, you're like, was that a Trump 2020 like flag on that house? Like that can't be. There's no way. You definitely have some pretty significant, I think, people just wishing that the passport they had, said USA instead of Canada. So it's I think certainly there's a little bit of small dick energy coming from some of the people who are looking at the big brother across.
Yeah, this is the thing with border towns. Very complicated, weird identity stuff going on there. You mentioned, though, St. Stephen being a lovely place to raise kids back when you were growing up. This is something St. Stephen says and claims is still the case, according to their website. It really brands itself to be as like the place to be in New Brunswick. And I want to read some of the copy from the official website to you and get your reaction, because it is, to me, it's a bit bold for a town of 8,000 people.
Let's see if they put these marketing dollars to good use.
Yes. Quote, at the center of everything that matters to you, safe neighborhoods, authentic people, and a warm spirit. I had literally teed up my question to ask you what the hell in the middle of everything even means, and you immediately clocked it. The next quote, residents are a healthy mix of young families, students, and active retirees. We work, shop, meet, and linger on leafy streets where rich architecture and ambience set the scene.
Whoa.
Sounds pretty wholesome to me. Practically like Stars Hollow in Gilmore Girls.
Literally.
So I guess my question for you is like, were you more of the Dean or the Jess growing up and being in high school?
Oh, wow.
Or were you Rory? It really depends. You could be anybody.
Yeah, it's a good question. And what's so funny is I feel like if I had have never met the my lovely partner who I'm with now, who is a massive Gilmore Girls fan, I would have had no idea what you're talking about. but I feel like I am acutely prepared to answer this question.
Amazing.
So I would say that I was pretty like, I don't know. I would say I was pretty Rory back in high school. I was very like type A. I enjoyed going out, hanging out with friends, but I was very much so always thinking about my next step. I was always thinking about like, where am I going after high school? And like, how am I setting myself up for like success later in life? Like I was very, I even remember like in high school, I literally didn't I had one girlfriend in high school because I was like, oh, as soon as I graduate, I'm leaving here regardless. So like, I'm not going to like build a
We're
relationship.
not going to be together.
I'm not going to build a relationship with anybody and then be like, all right, see you later. And just because I was always hell bent on, I loved St. Stephen, you know, growing up, but it was like the idea of even staying in New Brunswick. I was like, no, I need more. I need to go and experience a little bit more of the world. And so, yeah, I was very concerned with, is what I'm doing, is the action that I'm doing right now, is that setting me up for positivity as we move forward? I don't know. I also like, this is something that with my podcast, Life's a Wreck, you know, high school and going into university were some of the most trying times with my own mental health. And so I think that like Dean's, you know, occasional grumpiness and maybe standoffishness that we sometimes see. I think that that also certainly played a little bit of a role. Yeah.
So was St. Stephen like a romantic place to start dating in your early years, or was it like we're just doing, because this is the website makes it feel like wholesome, like everybody's going for cute little walks in like the fall amongst the forest and walking along the river and just doing cute wholesome things.
St. Stephen is it is a town you could romanticize. Like the opportunity to romanticize is absolutely present. I think that they've leaned into that more recently in terms of like they've rejuvenated like walks along the water and like finish those trails and stuff.
Rejuvenated it.
Yeah, oh well, trust me.
What was it before?
like beaten down like thorns and like just random like sticks that you would be like, if you were an elderly, they're talking about like the healthy mix of like young people and retirees. The retirees would have been like, what the hell? Like I can't go anywhere. I can't move anywhere, because it was literally like you know, when people talk about I can't remember what it's called, like passion paths or whatever. Like when you see a gate, but then it's like a
convenience paths.
Yes.
There's an official word for it, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
That was literally exactly what it was. All along our waterfront was just like one long convenience path where people had just decided like, God damn it, I'm going to walk along the water and nobody's going to stop me. And enough people had done that where it was just like beaten down and some gravel had been placed by the town. But yeah, now they've like paved it and it's like, whoa, it's like now big enough for a couple bicycles.
I was going to say, once you start paving the paths, that's when those big bike troops start to show up, and everybody, there's like, especially in retirement communities, you've got like packs of 12, 6-year-old men in their little Speedos just biking everywhere.
100%. For sure.
So other than walking along the waterfront and just going for hikes, I did a little bit of research into what it is that people get up to in St. Stephen. Here's what the internet had to say. So this is from Reddit, and this is mainly like looking back at their time as teenagers and being young people.
Okay.
There isn't much to do besides hit the bars on the weekend, or if you enjoy going to the Civic Center for hockey games. Usually people just cruise around downtown and hang out with each other. If you smoke weed or do pills, you'll make a lot of friends. Thoughts?
As somebody who didn't make a ton of friends in high school as being fairly type A, I had a good friend group, you know, but I was certainly, I think that some of the best friend groups were people who were down at the waterfront smoking weed and popping pills. So they like truly
pretty
like
chill people, you know,
like some of the best. Like it truly like an eclectic group of people who all came together and just seemed to like care about one another and be there for one another and hanging out. Yeah, I think that like what you described in terms of like there's not much to do. Like if you were underage, and even kind of going back to dating, like a legitimate date would be like, hey, let's go sit in like the Tim's parking lot and like chat and have like a muffin or something and like just kind of hang out. That was like a legitimate thing to do. It was like on tops of like priority lists. It was like we can go for a walk or we can drive around, hit the Tim's drive-through, park somewhere, just kind of hang out. But you couldn't park down by the waterfront because every weekend the waterfront would be reserved for. There was a little like back parking lot. So one of my first jobs in St. Stephen was actually working at the local radio station. That was like how I got involved with and I've got some funny stories about that. But behind the radio station was this like small parking lot that was like only like, it was almost like reserved. It was like they absolutely could have had like a red velvet rope with like a bouncer at the end of this driveway and been like, are you on the list? And you're like, no, sir, I don't smoke any of the marijuana. And they'd be like, get out of here. You're not meant for this place. Because it was like legitimately like a group of, 50 people and pickup trucks, like high school, early, just graduated, all just like down there, just smoking and drinking and having a good time. So that was, I didn't spend a lot of time by the waterfront then, but that was certainly a good place to be.
There's a big cloud of smoke coming up from behind the radio station. People
Literally.
are just like, that's the spot.
Is there a fire back there? I was like, no. Dude, just chill, man. Just chill.
That's such a good image for you to paint in my brain right now. This is one of the other quotes was there was never much going on unless you did it yourself. Smoking weed and hanging out with friends, drinking with friends, or driving around and off-roading was about
Ridge
all
runs.
we did as teenagers.
Ridge runs. Yeah. Okay. So
wait,
ridge
what
runs.
is a rage run?
Ridge run.
Okay.
So around St. Stephen, there was copious amounts of ridges. So like originally St. Stephen was like kind of like a bit of a hub for a bunch of other like small communities in the area. And then St. Stephen kind of like, encompassed all of them, but all like so many of them are named after ridges. It's like Old Ridge and
New Ridge.
Maybe I've been away for like a long enough now that I'm like, okay, I know there's Old Ridge. I think there's Bay Ridge. But they're like, I feel like people from St. Stephen are probably yelling, like the ghosts are yelling at me right now. But there's multiple ridges around. And what people would do is they would literally like get in cars with like a group of friends and like drive unbelievably recklessly, just like pin lines firing down these like long roads like at night. And it would come to these like, it was all like dirt roads, so it'd be like dirt corners, and you'd like drift around the dirt corner, and like that was like ridge running. You'd go ridge running with your friends. I don't know where the line is between a drive and a ridge run, but it when you it's like porn. Like it when you see it. You can't really define it, but you know it when you see it. That is the same thing with a ridge run. You're like, I don't know if I'm going for a drive or if this is a ridge run, but I feel like once I get there, I'm gonna know. Yeah. Once my stomach drops. Once my stomach drops,
I'm flying over a hill.
I'm sweating. I'm like texting my parents, like, "Hey guys, I want to be picked up now." Like that's when you know you're on a ridge run.
Yeah. Was there a specific type of driver that was always sort of the go-to ridge run driver that you would expect? That this is going to be a ridge run and not a regular drive.
Yes. Yeah. It was always somebody from the ridges. And it was typically somebody who had like so there was only two choices for a ridge run. It was either you were in like a borderline souped up pickup truck, or you were in like a 1998 Honda Civic with no suspension and like barely a back seat, like a back seat that's just like, you're like, why are the back seats like carved out of this place? It's just a room back here. Like that was the kind of car that was doing ridge runs. Either one or the other.
Industrial car in the back seat. So people are just flying around, no seatbelts.
Yeah, the thing is too is like you'd always kind of get tied into ridge runs. Like I feel like it was something where like you'd be hanging out. I had a friend of mine who was from one of the ridges, and he was like one of my closest buddies growing up. And it would be one of those things where you'd be out at like a party or something, and he'd be like, "Hey, dude, like we're gonna go for a drive. Like, do you want to come?" And you're like, "It is a lovely night. Like yeah, it's like beautiful. Yeah. The sun's out, the moon's out. Like let's go for a drive." And then all of a sudden you're like,
down.
Exactly. And then the next thing you know, you're also like, I've got a little bit of a buzz on, but like obviously if somebody's driving, there's no way that person possibly would have alcohol in their system. Nobody would be that stupid. And so you'd get into the back seat of like a beater, and you're like, okay, I've got my friend here. I don't know who you three people are. Like the other people in the car. Next thing you know, you're going 80 down a dirt road, and you're like, I didn't sign up for this. Like this wasn't what I wanted. So it was never something I feel like you like opted into. It was just I'm on a ridge run now.
Yes. This is why I bring locals on the podcast, because there's no way I would have ever found out about ridge runs on the internet. I did not find any traces of ridge runs. These seem to be very local, embedded, and possibly illegal.
Oh, heavily. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It was speeding. It was reckless driving. It was quite a bit of the time people would be like, I'm like, they'd say they were sober, but they'd be like, I'm totally okay. Just shut up, get in the car. And you're like, I don't know about this. I, by the way, if that was ever the case, I didn't get in the car.
Good for you, Kyle.
Yes, I would. I'm take a hard stance against drunk driving. It goes without saying, hopefully. But yeah, certainly, I think that a few people would smudge the truth a little bit.
Damn.
Yeah. One of those things you laugh and you look back on, but you're also like, oh, could have went worse.
This is the thing, Kyle. As of the official St. Stephen website, they claim to have 8,100 humans. As of the
show me the other 3,000. I don't know where this 8,000 is coming from.
This is the thing. As of the 2021 consensus, it said there was only about 4,000 people who lived there. That was only 3-4 years ago. So at the time of you being a teenager, I'm willing to bet it was probably somewhere around 3,000 people in that town.
Yeah.
Not much to do. Not very many people to hang out with. So yeah, you're doing ridge runs. You're smoking weed in parking lots behind the radio station. Other stuff to do around town. The internet suggests that most people actually just went to St. Andrew instead. St. Andrews.
Yes.
They said you could check out Minister's Island, go to the aquarium, check out the old gallows. One person said for tourists in the area, go to St. Andrews and then come back to St. Stephen for supper. And they suggested going to either Five Kings or Diner 81.
Nice.
An honorable mention for the Fat Pie Shop. Are any of these restaurants ringing a bell to you?
Not the Fat Pie Shop. Sorry to the Fat Pie Shop because it sounds like you got a good thing going. But but certainly Five Kings. Five Kings quickly became a bit of a St. Stephen institution because they were like, so St. Andrews and St. Stephen, like it, like without being hyperbolic, like we were truly like the ugly sibling. It was like everybody who came to our town was like, is this St. Andrews? And you're like, no, they're like 20 minutes down the road. They're like, oh my God, good. And you're like, what? Like, get out of here. This is okay. This is fine. We've got a good personality.
We're all having a nice time here.
I do find it funny that people are like, go to St. Andrews and then come back to St. Stephen. It's like, if you're in St. Andrews, like in terms, okay, Five Kings is great. I actually want to give like major props to Five Kings because when they came to St. Stephen, it was like legitimately a big deal because it was a micro brewery, gastropub, and like the only other restaurants that St. Stephen had really ever had was, I mean, the cornerstone of my culinary upbringing was Pizza Delight,
nice.
Which was like, when you actually think about like as far as Pizza Delights goes, ours was like on our wharf. So there was like, we had like this like tiny little jet out of a wharf with like a little tiny lighthouse at the end of it that was more for show than anything. And like, as you walk, you're like, wow, this is beautiful. And as you turn around, you're literally looking into like the dining room of a Pizza Delight. And that was like the best. That like, if you wanted out for like a graduation dinner, it was like either you go to St. Andrews or you go to Pizza Delight. Like that was the spot to be. And it was Pizza Delight and just a bunch of diners. And so, and granted, also shout out, not in that article, Carmen's Diner. You want to talk about institutions in St. Stephen. Carmen's Diner has been around forever. They are cheap and good and fast and like the nicest staff that you'll ever meet. And they're like the cream of the crop in terms of like small town diners. Carmen's Diner, highly, highly, highly recommend. But Five Kings came and it was like, oh, like somebody wants to invest in St. Stephen and actually bring some like different flavors. Like that was like, and I wish I was kidding when I said that, like when some people would go, like some of the older folks would go to Five Kings, like sometimes they were eating like meals for like the first time, like eating like certain meals. I don't know, like butter chicken, like, you know what I mean? Like just like random like stuff where you're just like, you know, people adventuring out from, you know, like, oh wow, this is like a butternut squash pappardelle, and you're like, oh, okay, I've never.
This is fancy.
This ain't no Chef Boyardee. So it was like that restaurant, like legitimately, it brought people, like people would come to St. Stephen to go to Five Kings. Like it was a great restaurant. And it's done well, even through the pandemic and everything, because people in St. Stephen like ride for Five Kings because Five Kings like showed up for us and were like, hey, St. Stephen, we believe in you. And so when people believe in St. Stephen, by the way, food wise, St. Stephen shows up like no other town in Canada. And this is actually proven because when Pita Pit showed up in St. Stephen and we're like, we're putting a Pita Pit on your front street and we're having a grand opening. It was the highest grossing grand opening of a Pita Pit in Canada ever. And that is a true fact. It lined up around the block for Pita Pit. people couldn't believe that we had a new spot to grab a chicken Caesar wrap. Like it was unbelievable. So yeah, no, St. Stephen rides for restaurants who make their way down.
This town rides hard for food. That food, chocolate. Let's get into this.
Straight.
This is basically the elephant in the room when it comes to talking about St. Stephen, because yes, it is the chocolate capital of Canada. Kyle, what is your relationship like to chocolate?
Chocolate and I have had an on and off again relationship for a number of years, mainly because I used to be employed by the fine folks at Ganong's Chocolatier.
I was wondering about that.
And during my high school days, I struggled mightily with acne. I had a face meant for a pizza box, and as I worked for Ganong's in their chocolatier, which I've got some funny stories, and I really want to tell you about the Ganong chocolatier. I ate, like, you were allowed to have as much chocolate as you wanted. That was like one of their things. And granted, they actually, like, the summer after the first summer I worked there, like, I think the staff really, like, we really like abused the hell out of that. Like, you can have as much chocolate as you want. Cause I would like leave with a couple chocolates in my hand and I'd show up and I'd have a couple more chocolates, and like the chocolates are awesome. Like the chocolates are really, really good. And I ate so many chocolates that summer that like I continued to break out in like, just like my entire face was sore, acne, like, you know, all of these different, it was a mess. And so the chocolate definitely like ruined my face for a few years. And then as I grew up, I stopped eating chocolate for a little bit because I was like, I gotta get this acne under control. And then like, anytime I go back to St. Stephen now, though, like I'm absolutely popping into the chocolatier and being like, hey, do you mind if I sample the peanut butter cups? And they're like, yeah, sure. And because it's a bunch of high school kids who don't know who I am. And and you just get like more free samples because it's, you just have to. The chocolatier was awesome. I also worked at the Chocolate Museum in St. Stephen, the St. Stephen Chocolate Museum. I've had plenty of experience in and around the world of Ganongs and chocolate. I look forward to sharing some fun stories from that time. Yeah.
There is so much to unpack here, Kyle, because you've been a part of the system, the chocolate system in
big chocolate,
St. Stephen. So I'm just going to quickly run through a little bit of the history of why St. Stephen is the chocolate capital of Canada. So St. Stephen, as you mentioned, is the home of Ganong, which is Canada's oldest family-owned candy company. It was established in 1873 by two brothers, and it's been passed down from generation to generation to generation. It's still running. It's still doing its thing. Ganong began selling the first ever chocolate bars in 1910, and they also pioneered the heart-shaped chocolate box, which is a fun fact. The Ganong factory has sort of like a chokehold on St. Stephen. Would you call it a chokehold?
Yeah, I would say it is one of the hands in the chokehold, and then flake board, or I think it's like a Runa or a Kuro or something like that bought what was the flake board factory, and that was the other hand in the chokehold between chocolate and then flake board. Those were the two industries that have probably employed 70% of our town. Yeah. So chocolate is like so ingrained into St. Stephen's identity 100%
that it actually, I saved a quote from the town's website description of
the
itself.
gift that keeps on giving this website.
Just for this segment, quote, "Get ready to savor every moment like it was a sweet piece of chocolate. Get ready to live your best life." Pretty bold when it comes to the chocolate side of things. So the Ganong factory employs like a huge portion of the town's residents. And I was going to ask you, Kyle, do you or your family have any ties to the chocolate factory? You do.
I do.
You have worked at the chocolate factory. You've worked at the museum. Any other honorable mentions you want to throw out there?
My mom worked at Ganong's for a little while.
Okay.
She was, my mom, bless her, was a stay-at-home mom for a number of years. And as she transitioned back into the workforce, one of the first places she worked was Ganong's up in the offices. And my sister also worked for the Ganong Chocolatier one summer as well. So the only person with no chocolate blood on their hands is my dad, who only would reap the benefits of free chocolate that we would bring home from work. But our it is funny because I never really think of like, oh yeah, like we all did at some point work for this company, but like literally 3 out of the 4 people in my immediate family did. So Ganong's has 2 factories in St. Stephen. It has the old factory, which is now, that was like the original Ganong factory, which is right downtown. And that is now where the mayor has his offices, the chocolate museum,
Yes.
the chocolatier, an event space, and then old folks living up like almost like a retirement community, but not quite, on the top floor. And that building is haunted as hell. And that was the interesting stuff, because it was like, anyway, I can get into that, because that to me was always like, growing up as a kid with anxiety and like heavily undiagnosed mental illness, the idea of working in a haunted place scared the fuck out of me. Like,
hell yeah.
I was terrified. I would go into work at the chocolatier on like a rainy day in the winter when it was like nobody was coming in the doors, and I would have to stand. This is almost embarrassing to share. I would literally stand outside of the chocolatier and wait for somebody to come in the door and follow them in and be like, "Hello, I work here and I want to help you," because I didn't want to be in the store by myself. And Katie, okay, I have to tell this one story because this was top of mind. One day, this woman comes in to the chocolatier, and it was one of those rainy days. I was outside. I was scared to be in there by myself, and I followed her in, and I said, "Hi, is there anything I can do to help you?" And her and I struck up this like great conversation. We chatted for a while. She talked about how her family had worked for Ganongs in this factory. I was like, "That's great." And so I got her chocolate, and we went over to the register. And now the register was in front of this old safe, and the safe was open, and it was used as a freezer for the chocolate. So at the end of the day, we'd take all the chocolate out of the display case, put it back in the freezer, and then bring it out the next day. And so the door for the freezer itself always had a weird vibe. It was always really creepy because it was this like old metal door that you're like, I'm working here by myself, but this thing closes. It would never lock, but like it would just be super freaky.
Immediately no.
Exactly. And so the door's propped open, and she's like, so it was actually my uncle who used to work here, like as I'm checking her out and boxing up all our chocolates and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like, when did he work here? And she was like, well, after one of the world wars, I can't remember which one. He actually came home and he worked for the Ganong Chocolatier, but he suffered from terrible PTSD. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And she goes, yeah, unfortunately, he actually took his life in the factory. And I was like, oh. And she goes, and she goes, and actually, it was in the safe right behind you. And I got goosebumps telling the story. Like I probably went pale as a ghost. Like I saw because I was like, oh, you don't say.
Why don't I just walk you outside really quick after we...
I called my dad after she left, and I said, Dad, I need you to like spend the night. It was like a Sunday or something like that. I was like, Dad, I need you to come hang out for the next 2 hours until my shift ends. I was so unbelievably freaked out. And yeah, apparently like this, and that was like one of many deaths that happened in this building. And yeah, we would always hear like sounds and noises and little creaks and cracks and like all the kind of stuff that like you could have sworn you saw somebody out of the corner of your eye, and it probably was just anxiety. I'll fess up to that, but it threw me off in a big way, and a lot of the other staff who worked there were also just as paranoid of paranormal activity.
Listen, Kyle, it could have been anxiety. It could have been a ghost. It could have been either or.
Bit of both.
Both things are invisible, so it's hard to say, right? So for the most part, people seem pretty okay with the town's sort of chocolate identity because it brings in jobs, it brings in tourists, and chocolate is sort of like embedded into a lot of people's childhood memories. Yeah. One person on Reddit said the majority of former residents have a lot of nostalgia with the factory. About 20 years ago, you could go through it, get candy throughout, and then more stringent food laws came in, and now you can't really do that anymore. Yeah. And then somebody else said, I've lived here for years, and the weird stranglehold that Ganong's has over the town is incredibly off-putting and totally undeserved. It's a crappy company, and it treats its employees and community terribly. I wouldn't advise anyone waste their money supporting them. Ganong chocolate is on par with Delecto, low quality, cheap tasting, and over-sugared garbage. That was the only negative thing I could find about Ganong's. For the most part, everybody loves it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. So I understand. I was like, Ganong's does do Delecto. Like I didn't understand what, but they were basically saying that like Delecto chocolates suck and so does Ganong's.
Yeah.
Which is not unfair. It's not unfair. So
The hot takes.
the hot takes are not unreasonable. The Ganong chocolate, the Ganong corporation company, they are not the greatest employer, although they do employ a large portion and make sure that, you know, a lot of St. Stepheners have food on their table and their kids are, you know, able to have enough to go to school and everything like that. They are known for just not being like the best. Like, and that's okay. Some businesses, you're not going to be like beloved by everybody. But very few people who worked for Ganong's were like, this is my company and I love them and they take care of me and I take care of them and I'm riding for these people. It was more like, it's a job, like clock in, clock out. Yeah. So yeah, Ganong's like, and the other thing too is like, I've got a qualm with old money a little bit, right? And my qualm with old money is that like when you are the grandson of somebody who like started this big thing and you come into a space and you expect it to be treated like a VIP, I don't know. Like the Ganong family has been okay. As far as I know, in terms of stories I've heard, they've been okay. I have heard the occasional story of the people who run the company now, and even a couple generations, above them, and even some of their the upcoming generation. A little bit. I have my way of things, and I like it that way. And if you don't make it that way, like I'll make a stink out of it. And so, yes, certainly that family, I would say in terms of strangleholds, yes, that family definitely does have a stranglehold in terms of like St. Stephen is their town kind of thing. And that to me is always a little bit like kind of ruffles my feathers a little bit. And I'm like, all right, take a seat. Just the idea of showing up and showing up with your chocolate nose in the air. I don't know.
This is the perfect segue, Kyle, because I have a theory here, but I'm going to save it till we get through these jots that I have in my script.
Okay.
But I think you're going to catch my drift. So I want to talk to you about Chocolate Fest.
Yeah.
What does it look like to experience Chocolate Fest, Kyle?
Chocolate Fest has dwindled since I was in my youth. But when I was young, Chocolate Fest like kind of hit. Like Chocolate Fest was pretty happening. They had like live music happening all the time, farmers markets. We would do like chocolate pudding eating contests in like the town square. A lot of like cookie decorating and box your own chocolate events. But then we also had, and this is something that I'm not sure if they do anymore, but was the coolest thing, was they had the town-wide scavenger hunt. And what we would do is basically like you would have like teams of families, and these families would team up, and you would like rip around all of St. Stephen and like kind of surrounding area. Like you would get sent out like into the ridges, and they would not the ridges. People started to drive a little quicker when they got out of town. And anyway, they would hide these clues like in these areas. And so you would have to, and they would be riddles and you'd have to decipher the riddle. And they were like legitimately hard riddles that would then lead you to the next clue. And then whatever family won, you would race back to town square where like the mayor would be waiting for you. And if you won, you got like, it was like 4 of the biggest boxes of chocolate. They were like 2-pound boxes that like each family would take home like 2. And yeah, it was like, you were more in it for the glory, to be honest. It wasn't like the chocolate that was really the thing. It was the like, I won the annual scavenger hunt, which my family did one time. I don't want to like, Katie,
Hall
please.
Hall of Famer over here.
I didn't want this to override our entire conversation, but yes, we were once townwide champions. Anyway, I
wonder if they make sure that the winners are always going to be people who worked at the factory at one point or worked for the Ganong family.
That would be interesting if it like they had 2 sets of clues, one of which led families in the wrong way, and then if like somebody came up who was like, they was like, say your employee number, and they were like, 1347, and then they give you the right clue. And you're like, oh, thank you.
Yes.
Now
okay.
Kiss Mr. Ganong's boots, and you get the proper clue. Yeah, here you are, sir. Thank you for my job.
This is what I'm saying, Kyle. So Chocolate Fest started in 1984, and it was meant to be sort of, quote, a unique celebration of our town's rich chocolate heritage.
Yeah. Cool.
It usually takes place in August, which to me is a wild choice, given the context of it. Chocolate, kids.
Melty everywhere. Yeah.
Lots of sticky kids everywhere. It takes place all over St. Stephen, as you mentioned, and even some other parts of New Brunswick. And if you look at the Chocolate Fest website, it looks like it's mostly run by young people, like people in their early 20s, which is interesting to me because you mentioned lots of teens working at the factory and at the chocolatier and at the museum. So we've got teens already in the Ganong family tree of workmanship, I guess I'll put it. But generally, people seem to love Chocolate Fest. There's a testimonial on their website that says, Chocolate Fest is one of the best festivals in New Brunswick. Our family had so much fun learning about the Ganongs and enjoyed all the Chocolate Fest events we went to. We will be returning every year that we can.
Nice.
And another Redditor went on to say that it's the only good thing that St. Stephen has. They need to hang on to it. But we need to dig into this further, Kyle, because some of the events of Chocolate Fest 2024 included the scavenger hunt, a big treasure hunt, a family fun run, a community pancake breakfast, arts and crafts workshops, a chocolate pudding eating contest, and a dance.
Okay.
But they have some other interesting activities and events going on.
Okay.
They did something called Chocolate Bar Bingo, where participants had to come and bring a bar of chocolate as their entry fee. And then the winner won like the whole pot of chocolate bars that were brought in.
Okay.
They had a Chocktail Hour, which is where adults got to drink chocolate-themed cocktails and desserts.
Yep. I remember that.
I think most notably, and as you mentioned, they had numerous candy-making workshops. Kyle, Chocolate Fest to me just sort of feels like Ganong propaganda, shaping the youths of St. Stephen into future chocolate lovers, chocolatiers, Ganong factory workers. How does all of this sit with you?
As a former resident of St. Stephen, I can neither confirm nor deny if child labor is involved with the production of Ganong chocolates. Maybe that's why Delectos suck. Per that person who complained,
because it
was kids making it during Chocolate Fest.
Don't know how to do stuff like that.
It's what's so funny is low key. I think you might be onto something, like actually, because like the way now that I'm like processing it, now that I've been plucked from this, from the echo chamber that is Ganong propaganda, they like make the kids like wear PPE as they're doing the dipping. So I'm thinking like they wear the same clothes as the adults do. They do the same dipping. The adults are teaching them how to do it. It's like always like the most like senior people at the Ganong's factory are always like showing them how to make these chocolates.
No, don't do it that way. It has to be dipped in this particular way. That's just family tradition.
Try again
next year.
Next year.
Doing it for years.
Exactly. Until you're 17 years old and you're graduating high school and you're like, well, I'm not really good at anything except chocolate dipping.
Chocolate.
I was always really good at dipping chocolate. I've got like 7 years of experience doing this. Oh my God.
I'm just saying, you yourself have been through the Ganong family pipeline. You went to the Chocolate Fest. You participated in all of those things. You were fully bought in as a family winner of the treasure hunt.
Yes.
And then not only did you go from there, but you then eventually worked at numerous locations.
Multiple.
Yeah. And I think it was only due to your acne that really slowed you down from the chocolate factory pipeline.
I could have possibly, if I had have been more open to dating in high school, I might have even married into the family for all I know, right? Like there could have been, oh my God, I might have, I almost had the Ganong claws sunk. I would have been doing a chocolate podcast right now.
Yeah,
it would have been the Ganong family produced, like My Life in Chocolate with Kyle Moore.
What this is.
This literally, like somehow
this is that podcast.
The sub. Yes, exactly. The I feel like a Ganong sleeper agent whenever I'm doing podcasts. I get like activated, and it's like I'm like, yes, my mental health is bad. Unlike Ganong chocolates, which are the best in town. Sorry, did I just say?
You know what will give you a dopamine hit you've been looking for? Sugar from the Ganong Factory.
Drop your antidepressants and pick up a box of Delectos.
Okay, Kyle, you have brought me a slice of hometown tea today. I don't know if it's real, if it's fake, something you've just heard through the Ganong family pipeline of gossip. But please, I'm going to guess at the end, spill your hometown tea.
Okay. So this story ties a few things together. So the weed smoking at the waterfront and being on a border town. So I'm not going to use any real names.
Sorry, I just have to say, it just occurred to me we could connect the dots between chocolate and weed easily. And we never did, but sorry, continue.
I think the Ganong Factory for years has been pumping THC into the atmosphere to just get people being like, do you feel like a chocolate bar right now? I could go for one. I don't know about you guys. The dots are connecting already. To keep everybody safe and anonymous, there was a kid that I went to high school with who I was not particularly close with, but was one of the kids who was very active within like the scene at the waterfront. And he had a lot of the families in St. Stephen had dual citizenship because somebody would meet somebody from across the border, they would get married, they'd have kids, and the kid would have dual citizenship. And so this particular individual had an uncle who was from Calais, Maine, and the uncle was involved in some dubious behavior involving drugs. And so this kid and his uncle were quite close. He came from a bit of a tough background as his parents weren't necessarily super involved. And so he spent a lot of time with his uncle. And the uncle and him would go on camping trips, and they would go to a cottage that was pretty far up the St. Croix River. And so they would go on these camping trips up to a cottage that apparently they had up the St. Croix River. And this kid would be one of like the kind of main suppliers of marijuana and other drugs to some of the youth in St. Stephen. And it came out through gossip. So this kid moved away under some mysterious circumstances in like grade 11. And again, I was not particularly close with him. This is all stuff that I as I was keeping my nose clean, getting ready to pursue a sport media degree, very, very tough to get into. I heard through the grapevine. So this kid took off in like grade 11, and his uncle was also like not really heard from as much after that. And because of the fact that the police force was quite like, everybody had grown up together. A lot of people like on the police force were from St. Stephen and knew each other. And the family that this kid was a part of was like, a third generation St. Stephen kind of family. And so it came out that this kid and his uncle were running drugs from the States to Canada using, this is the funny part, a blow up mattress that they would push across the St. Croix River. And then the kid, once he was in Canada, would take the drugs back to St. Stephen, distributed them around to other high school students who would then sell them. And then he would take the money back to his uncle in Calais. And the cops, because it was hard to prove, this was something where the cops basically said, hey kid, get out of here. Uncle, get out of here. Stop doing this, and nothing will really ever come of it. And so this kid took off, never knew where he went, never heard from again. Apparently he had went out west to work in the oil fields. So that was the drug running high school student who was using a floating air mattress to get drugs from the States to Canada. And
his model was never shut down. There could be another air mattress drug running scheme happening somewhere else.
All I'll say is that multiple air mattresses have been found floating down the St. Croix River because it is a fast moving river. And there have been like multiple air mattresses pulled out of the St. Croix River. So who knows? Who knows? It could have just been weekenders, just making dues. But yeah, that was a fun one. And actually one of the kids in high school ended up getting busted, and it was this huge deal because he was the son of a teacher at the school, and it was a very
those are always the kids, aren't they?
I love he's still a good buddy of mine. That was a funny one. So yeah, that's my town gossip for you.
It's got to be true, right?
It is not true.
What?
Parts of it are true. Parts of it are true.
Okay, which parts are true?
that there was a high school student who was supplying some marijuana to other high school students. They were not selling it and getting the money and bringing it back to a kingpin uncle.
They were just smoking it.
But they were just smoking it, and one of them did get caught and was a part of a family that worked for the school board, and so that was a big deal. But that story inspired by real events where somebody tried to come across the border illegally using an air mattress up the St. Croix River. They were caught and sent back to the States. But yeah, so it's a little combination of a couple different pieces of gossip, but in its entirety, not true.
Oh, such a good story, though. What a funny, hilarious mental picture of someone just like dragging an air. How many rapids? Like, how big of a river is this?
It's enough of a fast moving river that like one of the things you can do on the weekend is go to a camping area and hop in an inner tube and float down rapids on the St. Croix River, and it like takes probably an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to like the bottom portion where they like pull you out and you're done.
Oh, hell yeah. That's so exciting. Kyle, thank you so much for coming on Canardian. Tell me what's new at Life's a Wreck, how people can listen to the show and generally support you.
Oh, I appreciate that. So right now, Life's a Wreck, we just wrapped a full season of Life's a Wreck about a month-ish ago at this point, maybe a little over a month. So would highly recommend, I put, the team at Snack Labs and I put a ton of work into that season. It's got some of the most fun episodes I've ever done in terms of like some fun like production and soundscapes and that kind of stuff, which is great, and some incredible guests. And so that, I would highly recommend checking that out. You can find that wherever you get your podcast. Just look up Life's a Wreck and you should see it. Season 7 is the most recent season. I've been doing some more public speaking, which has been awesome. So if you want to like look me up on Instagram, that's always a great way to support the work that I'm doing, which is just at Morzy, which was a nickname from university. And then Life's a Wreck at Life's a Wreck podcast on Instagram as well. And those are the two places to follow me. And Katie, this is what you're doing is so cool, and everything that you do for the podcasting space. I'm such a big fan. So thank you for having me. And this has been an absolute blast.
Oh, thank you so much, Kyle. This was such a pleasure. I had so much fun. My last words here, I'm going to put all of Kyle's links in the show notes as well. And then you can find any information about me, the links to my newsletter and all of that in the show notes as well. The Canardian theme song is by my very talented partner, Mark Allen, with support from his own hometown buddies, People Like Us. And if you liked the podcast or you know someone from St. Stephen, New Brunswick, please share it with them or somewhere in your Instagram story, somewhere on social media, somewhere where people will see it. Otherwise, see you around town.